So we are here, guys. We are in the holidays, and it is baking season officially. At least for me, it is. I like to bake a ton of different things, but I like to also consider how I can maximize my health benefits and not overdo it on the sweetness and like the sugars, but find ways of making sure that things taste really good, they're coming out right, but using substitutions in a way that is gonna be almost as equal as the product that I am making, right? Because when you substitute anything, it's always going to change the outcome to some degree. Sometimes it can be completely different with texture, for example, or it could change taste. But overall, I mean, your goal is to reach something very close to what is, full sugar, full butter, full fat, and everything like that. But let's talk about that. Okay, let's start with sugar. So sugar plays a huge role. There's a great chemical reaction that sugar plays. Aside from it being the sweetness that we love, it actually adds a leavening, it adds texture, and it actually helps absorb the fats and gives it that fluffiness texture that we love, right? Or if you can, have a crunchiness that you love too, which is the caramelization of it breaking down when it becomes from a solid to a liquid when you add it to the liquid mixture. So if you want to replace that and still have the same kind of effect, you can definitely replace it with coconut sugar. And you don't have to even add brown sugar. Just use coconut sugar, which is far better replacement than brown sugar, which is just sugar and molasses and cane sugar. And then to add a little bit more sweetness, you can use monk fruit powder extract, not sweetener because that has ethanol in it. I would use those if you're making cookies. Okay, let's talk about butter and oil. Now butter, oh my gosh, it does so much. It not only just provides like flavor, but it adds texture, it adds leavening, it adds tenderness. It does so much. So to remove it completely is going to change the game of the whole outcome of your baking product, right? So to replace that though, if you're looking to get rid of it because of dairy free, or you don't want to add that fat because you're looking to reduce cholesterol, whatever it is, then you can use applesauce, which replaces eggs and oil. And if you want to also try FlaxEggs, that is just ground flaxseed meal with water, and it's just a couple of tablespoons of flaxseed meal with a few tablespoons of water, and you let it sit and thicken, and then you have voila, flax eggs. And they work great, but flax eggs will absorb more moisture, so it can change a bit of the outcome of your baked goods. So you want to add probably a little more moisture. You can also add like yogurt, like a dairy-free yogurt or a Greek yogurt, whatever you want to use. Dairy-free, non-dairy-free. But you can use those to replace oils and fats. And that also gives, when you do add like a yogurt, it can also bring tenderness and a bit of a different type of structure to your baked good. So that one's another good way to substitute oil. And also, obviously, like pumpkin puree is a great one too. So there's options, and it will still give you like a really delicious, more natural baked good. And I prefer it actually. Like I'm getting more and more used to it, and over these years I just find that it tastes a lot better, and it works really well with my system and my family. But so that's for the fat and butter substitution. Okay, let's talk about egg substitution. Not everyone does this because they want to keep it in the recipe, and eggs obviously play a huge role, leavening purposes, for example. But if you are looking to replace it, FlaxEggs, which is so easy to make, it's just a couple tablespoons of flaxseed meal ground and about 5 to 6 tablespoons of water, and that replaces 2 eggs. If you were going to replace 2 eggs and you want to use applesauce, unsweetened, it's about a quarter cup per egg. So half a cup you would use total to replace 2 eggs. And applesauce also replaces oil. So you could use applesauce, but make sure you use another quarter cup it's like a 1-to-1 ratio for oil. So that way you make sure you get all of the right ingredients or right amount for your substitutions. Chia seeds is a couple tablespoons in water, and you let it sit until it thickens like flax eggs or flax eggs. Let's talk about flours. Obviously we know what flour does, but did you know that it is very critical to understand how much protein is in flour? So all-purpose flour has protein, but some flours that say all-purpose don't have the right amount of protein that you need to give your structure to your cookies or your breads, cakes, and breads need even higher protein content. But won't talk about breads. So if we're doing cakes or cookies, muffins, whatever, you need protein, but not exorbitant amounts. But if you're going to look to substitute it, then I would look for like a 1-to-1 ratio brand. Like Bob's Red Mill is probably one of the best ones for gluten-free 1-to-1 ratio baking flours. But if you want to tackle it on your own, then it's a little more trickier because there's so many different flours out there. So let's kind of break it down a little bit. I'm not going to go into full detail though, okay? All right, so with almond flour, that's like one of the most popular ones for substituting flour, but what almond flour doesn't have is a lot of protein in it. So when you make something with almond flour, it's going to be crumbly, it's not going to hold its structure, and you usually need something in conjunction with it to help bind whatever it is that you're making. Now, some people will use coconut flour, which is another big popular one, but coconut flour has its coconut flavor that doesn't always match whatever it is that you're making. And it also can add it's going to be binding, but it's going to still not have that solid outcome that you would want. So, those two can be a little bit tricky to work with. Oat flour, I personally feel like works one of the best, and you can use gluten-free oats and then grind it yourself. So then you have homemade oat flour, and that is one of the best ones for a 1-to-1 ratio with, so yeah, it replaces all-purpose flour pretty well. Now chickpea, I don't like it. I can't get over the taste. I've used it a few times. I've tried to like it. It does work, and it works well with almond butter or almond flour, and it does work with oat flour, but I just can taste that, and I don't. It's extremely earthy for me, too much. But there's people that I know that love it, so it's a preference, right? But I'm gonna stop there. There's just so many different flours. Since it is baking season, I would just stick to a 1-to-1 ratio, like a Bob's Red Mill. Because there's a lot of different ways you can experiment. There's rice flour, there's rye flour, there's buckwheat flour, and there's a purpose for all of them. But if you have the time, I would recommend experimenting with the different flours if you do. It is fun. So I forgot to talk about dairy. So if you're replacing dairy, almond milk, I know people want to go to that one, and it does work because I use it often, but it's not always my favorite one because it doesn't have a lot of protein and it doesn't have a lot of fat in it. So it's great if you're doing like a low cal, but the best one I feel, there's two actually, is oat milk because there's a lot of fat and protein content, as well as soy. Those two usually are really good for substituting dairy. And then there's other, plant-based milks out there that you can experiment with if you want, if you have like something that you just really prefer using. But just make sure that the fat and the protein content is higher. That way it will hold its structure. It will absorb things a lot better. It'll hold its weight. So yeah, that's for the dairy. And I think that's it for now. So have fun baking.